had a surname that opened doors. Until I found out that million-dollar deals had been signed under it by my own hand. At 19, I became part of a scheme I had never seen before. And at 29, I was the key witness in a case against the man I called my uncle. My name is Avril Lane. I am 29. And until this summer, I thought I had made it. Not in the glossy magazine sense. No yachts, no multi-million-dollar apartments, no resorts with champagne glasses. I just managed to break free. Out of a small town, out of the shadow of a powerful family, out of oppressive family pride. I had my own apartment, a stable job at an investment fund in New York, the respect of my colleagues, and the beginnings of self-confidence. It seemed that I was finally breathing on my own. Everything collapsed on Tuesday, May 14th. The day began like any other. I woke up at 6:30, drank my coffee in the kitchen, flipped through Bloomberg, and checked the financial markets. It was calm. Stable. I got out of the shower, wrapped myself in a towel, and the phone rang. An unfamiliar number with the 202 area code. Washington. Lane speaking, I answered, still drying my hair. Miss Lane, this is Special Agent Molina from the U.S. Department of Justice. We need to talk to you urgently. At first, I thought it was a prank. From my ex, with whom I remained in a strange, friendly relationship. But her voice didn't waver. She wasn't playing games. It was cold, precise, like a scalpel. This concerns your involvement in Lexford Holdings, Ardenbridge Capital, and a series of offshore transactions between 2015 and 2018. I froze. My wet hair dripped onto the floor. In my hand was a cup of coffee that suddenly seemed too hot. You have the wrong number, I tried to laugh. I don't know what you're talking about. I was in graduate school at the time. However, we have documents with your signature, copies of your passport, and your tax ID number. We would like you to come to our office for a discussion. Is this some kind of joke? You will receive an official notice by the end of the day. It is advisable that you have a lawyer with you. She hung up. I stood there for a minute in silence until the phone rang again. This time it was my boss. Can you come in early today? We have some government officials here. They want to see you. When I arrived at the office at 8:10, everything was as usual. My secretary Joan was drinking coffee from a thermos, and Jim, the security guard, waved at me. The elevator took me up to the 38th floor, and it was only in the empty hallway that I first felt that the world had become crooked. Two men were standing outside my office. One was in a suit with a Doge ID around his neck. The other was in a sweater, but his eyes seemed to have scanned the entire life of everyone he had ever seen. Miss Lane, the first one said. Agent Molina is already inside. Let's go to the conference room. They sat down across from me at a long table. I sat at the end, my hands folded, breathing shallowly. Did you sign these documents? Molina asked, laying out folders in front of me. I glanced at them. Company registration certificates. Signatures. All of them were mine. And it wasn't just that they looked similar. They were mine. Every loop, every quirk of my handwriting, as if I had actually done it. This isn't possible. I didn't work with any foundations in 2015. I was a student. Nevertheless, here are the transactions. Through accounts opened in your name. Your signature is on contracts with investors from Miami, London, and Singapore. The total amount is $7.2 million. I was freezing. I couldn't focus. I couldn't understand if it was a joke, a hack, or a hallucination. And then I saw his name. In the lower corner of one of the documents, under the heading Legal Support, it said, Alan Lane. My uncle. Partner at a law firm in Philadelphia. My godfather. The man who gave me my first laptop, who wrote me every Thanksgiving. I never worked with him directly, but we were close. Like family. I felt nausea rising. This must be a mistake, I whispered. Molina sighed and said, Ms. Lane, we're not here to threaten you. But this is a serious situation. The documents you signed were used as the basis for a series of financial transactions that are currently being investigated as a potential money laundering scheme. I wanted to say something else, but I couldn't find the words. My throat was tight. After the meeting, I didn't go home. I drove around the city aimlessly until I stopped at a cafe on the Upper East Side. I sat down by the window, ordered tea, and for the first time in several hours looked at myself from the outside. Who am I? Some signature in the past, made by someone else or even by me but without understanding? Was I used? I took an old notebook out of my bag, I always carry one with me, and started writing. What did I remember from 2015? Were there any documents I had signed at the request of relatives? What trips to Philadelphia had I taken? Had anyone had access to my personal data? And then I remembered. Spring 2015. A visit to Uncle Alan. I was exhausted from my studies. He said, "I'll take care of everything. You trust me, right? You just need to sign a few forms. Student taxes, legalization of your internship." I signed a few papers without even reading them. He gave me a pen with his company's logo on it. I felt cold. I signed. I really signed something. But what exactly? I arrived home at almost 10 in the evening. Instead of the subway, I took an Uber. I just couldn't stand the thought of a crowded car, strangers' faces too close, smells, noise, advertisements. The first thing I did was lock all the doors. Double locks. Deadbolts. Then I turned off all the lights except for the bedside lamp and sat down on the edge of the bed with my laptop. I opened my email. I turned on the VPN verification and checked my archives. I started with 2015. Nothing. No strange emails, no PDF files except for old essays from my master's program. But something bothered me. There was an entry in my Google Calendar, Lex Consult, May 16th, 10 a.m., Uncle's office. I would never have entered that myself. I didn't even have a regular planner back then. I switched to the tab with the documents sent to me from the department. I downloaded them one by one. I started reading carefully. Lexford Holdings LLC registered in Delaware on May 22, 2015. The founder listed was Avril J. Lane. And the registered agent, Field, Ale Legal Services, i.e. my uncle's firm. Another file, an investment agreement between Lexford and a Singapore company for $1.3 million. On the last page was my signature. The date was May 27, 2015. Something inside me shuddered. In May of that year, I was on antidepressants. I had just gone through a difficult semester, a failed relationship, and health problems. Everything was blending together. And I remembered one moment. I arrived at my uncle's place in Philadelphia. He picked me up at the train station. We went to his office in the city center on the 24th floor of a skyscraper, overlooking the Rocky Mountains of Pennsylvania. He said, "You can relax here. While I take care of a few things, just sit in the conference room." He gave me a bottle of water and some cookies. I sat down. Half an hour later, he came back with several folders. "Here are some documents. I need you to confirm them for the tax authorities. It'll be quick." I remember not asking any questions. I just signed. I remember how my hand was shaking from fatigue, medication, or both. And I remember his hand warm, broad on my shoulder. "You're a real Lane. You'll make us proud." At the time, those words warmed me. Now they burned. The next morning, I drove to my mother's house in East Orange, New Jersey, in the house she and my father had bought in the 90s. After his death, she was left alone. We didn't see each other often. She said she didn't want to interfere with my New York life. In reality, we were just learning to be apart. I walked in without ringing the doorbell. My mother was sitting in the kitchen in her robe, reading the newspaper as usual. "You didn't call me," she said without looking up. "I couldn't talk yesterday," I replied, putting my bag on a chair. "Something serious happened." She finally looked at me, straight into my eyes. "Something at work?" I sat down across from her. "Mom, I was called to the Department of Justice. They're linking me to financial companies I've never even heard of. But my name is on the documents. And Uncle Alan is in there too." She froze at first. Then she looked down. I knew this would come out someday. I couldn't breathe. "You knew." "Not everything," she sighed. "But I suspected something. He was involved in some shady deals when your father was alive. I overheard bits and pieces of conversations. Your father, he didn't want to get you involved in this. But after he died, Alan became too active. Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I was afraid." She finally looked at me. "And Avril because he's our relative. We all grew up with that name. I thought if I just left it alone it would go away. I was wrong." I didn't know what to say. We sat in silence until she got up, went to the pantry, and returned a minute later with a cardboard box. "This is from your father's study. He collected everything, letters, clippings, even notes." I didn't have the strength to open it. But maybe it's time. I opened the box. Inside were old notebooks, a stack of printouts, and envelopes. One of them was addressed to me. Written in ink, "Avril. Open if you have questions. Dad." I opened the letter. "Avril, if you're reading this, something has gone wrong. I didn't have time to tell you everything, but you need to know, be careful with Alan. He's not who he says he is. I suspected that he was using relatives as fronts for his schemes. In 2015, I found out that your signature appears on documents you've never seen. I tried to gather evidence. If I'm not around, don't keep quiet. Protect yourself. And always remember, your name is not his legacy. It's your choice. I was shaking. I had never heard my father speak so firmly. I folded the letter, pressed it to my chest, and cried for the first time in a long time. It was more than a conspiracy. It was betrayal. By those closest to me. But I didn't know yet how many people knew. Or who else was involved. From that moment on, I decided I would not remain silent. When I returned home from my mother's house, I sat on the floor in the hallway for a long time. I leaned my back against the closet, holding my father's letter and a box of documents in my hands. It was already past midnight, but I couldn't go to sleep. Phrases echoed in my head. Be careful with Alan. He uses his relatives as pawns. Don't keep quiet. These words broke something old inside me. That same naive belief that family is a refuge. That those who give you a name will not use it against you. I got up, made myself some black tea, sat down at my laptop, and opened a tab in Signal, the encrypted messaging app my IT friends used. I opened a chat with Eli. Avril, are you awake? I need help. Eli, I'm always here for you. What happened? Avril, can you check if anyone has accessed my Gmail, Google Drive, or email signature in the last 10 years? Especially in 2015. Also, my uncle, Alan Lane. He's a partner at a law firm. I think he may have had access to my personal data. Eli, give me 30 minutes. I need your logins, hashed passwords, and permission through your VPN. I gave him everything. 27 minutes later, he sent me a screenshot. Eli, look. In May 2015, someone logged into your Google account from an IP address belonging to Lane's law firm. There were 3 logins from the same IP address, one of which coincided with the date Lexford Holdings was created. There's something even worse. I stopped. My palms were sweaty. Eli, there's a scan document saved on your drive. It's called Lexforward_initial_docs. It was created on May 26, 2015, and last modified in June 2018. You're the owner, but the metadata says otherwise. He sent another screenshot. Author, Alan Lane. Device, AOL MacBook Pro. Location tag, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I stared at the monitor and felt something like anger, fear, and shame rising in my chest. I had been used. He created a document, logged into my account, put everything under my name, and I didn't even suspect a thing. Avril, can you download this document and save a copy with the metadata? With signatures, all changes, logs? I'll need to provide this to the investigation. Eli, already saved. And something else. Eli sent me a link. It was an archived email from the same period. It was from alan.lane@allegalgroup.com to someone named Gerald Roth. The subject line read, signature in place. Avril is unaware. All set. I felt nauseous. Who is Roth? I wrote. The owner of an investment company in Singapore that I found in the documents. I think it's part of a bigger scheme. So I was used as a frontman. Investments were made in my name. Exactly, Eli replied. And it looks like it was planned. It wasn't a coincidence. I didn't respond. I just put my laptop down and went to the kitchen. I wasn't a victim who had been mugged in an alley. I was the victim of a carefully planned attack. But the most painful thing was that the attacker was someone I knew. The next day, I made an appointment with the lawyer who specialized in white-collar crime. We had met at conferences before, so I knew I could trust her. Her name was Naomi Gray. We met in a small office in downtown with no signs or logos. Tell me everything, she said, taking out a notebook. This is not the time for emotions. Just the facts. I told her about the DOJ call, the documents, my uncle, and Eileen's help. I gave her the flash drive with the evidence, copies of my father's letter, and my email logs. She listened silently, only occasionally asking for clarification. And your mother knew? She finally asked. Partially. She was scared. Naomi sighed. You're in a very dangerous situation, Avril. If it is confirmed that you were legally involved in investment transactions, even unknowingly, it could be interpreted as complicity. If there isn't enough evidence that you didn't know, the case could go against you. But I have the logs. I have my father's letter. That's good. But it's not ideal. We need direct testimony, or, even better, Alan's confession. He'll never confess. Then we'll make him. But you have to be ready. Because it's going to be a war. Public, dirty, and painful. I nodded. I already knew. Because the most painful part was already over. I had lost my faith. When I entered the Department of Justice office, it felt like I was breathing through glass. Every step felt like I was in a dream. Naomi walked beside me, calm and collected, wearing a dark blue suit like in a TV show about lawyers. Only real, tough, the kind who doesn't let their client say too much. Stick to the facts. No assumptions. If you're not sure, say, I don't remember. She looked at me seriously. Their goal is not to find out the truth. It's to make you look guilty. I was led into a windowless room. White walls. A table. 3 chairs. A camera on the ceiling. On the other side of the glass, I knew someone was watching us. 2 agents entered the room. The same ones who had been in my office. Agent Molina had short hair, a dark gray jacket, and eyes that never blinked. Next to her was Agent Bailey, a burly man with a sharp gaze. Mississippi Lane, Molina began. Thank you for coming voluntarily. I'm here to cooperate, I replied. Sit down. We have a few questions. I nodded. Naomi placed a notepad in front of her but didn't say a word. The first 20 minutes were basic questions. Education. Places of employment. Relationship to Alan Lane. Have you ever worked for the law firm Ale Legal Group? No, I replied. I only interned there for a week in 2014, but I wasn't officially hired. Do you remember signing any documents to register a company in 2015? No. I may have been asked to sign some forms for tax purposes, but I didn't know what I was signing. Are you saying you didn't read the documents you signed? Naomi leaned forward. My client was 22 at the time. She was in an emotionally vulnerable state, and she signed the papers trusting a family member who presented them as insignificant forms. Molina's expression didn't change. Are you aware that these documents were used to open accounts in the Cayman Islands? That they were used to transfer funds from accounts in Singapore and Luxembourg? I only found out about that just now. Bailey opened another file. And here's this letter. Sent from your account in May 2015. You wrote, signed. Go ahead. Wasn't that you? I looked at it. And for the first time I recognized the style. It was me. My writing style. But I didn't remember this letter. And I definitely didn't write it deliberately. I don't remember writing that. But the style is mine. It could have been someone who had access to my account. And who could that be? I looked at them and said nothing. Ms. Lane, Molina said. If you think a member of your family took advantage of you, you have to say so. Otherwise, you're an accomplice. My uncle had access to my personal data, I said. My voice was shaking. He helped with tax papers, asked for logins and passwords. I trusted him. Can you prove you didn't know about these transactions? Yes. I have electronic logs and document metadata proving that the documents were not created on my device. I also have a letter from my late father warning about the possible use of my name. Naomi handed over a flash drive with the files. Here is everything that proves my client's innocence. You will see that in all the digital documents signed on her behalf, the author is Alan Lane, not her. Molina took the flash drive. For the first time, her eyebrows twitched. We'll check it out. But even if you didn't know, it's still a problem. You appear to be the person through whom millions of dollars passed. Whether you're a front or not, we'll find out. I want to know the truth, I replied. I don't want to defend someone who betrayed me. Are you willing to testify? Naomi put her hand on my elbow. I looked at her and nodded. Yes. Ready? When we left the interrogation room, my legs felt like jelly. The fresh air of New York, with its smoke, sirens, and screams, seemed like the cleanest in the world. You did it, Naomi said. I'm scared, I replied honestly. What if they don't believe you? We'll make them believe you. But you have to choose. You either continue this fight, or you go back to hiding behind your family name. I looked up at the sky, and I realized that I was no longer afraid of the truth. I was afraid of only one thing, living in the shadow of a lie. I stood on the platform at the train station in Philadelphia and watched as the tail of my train slowly disappeared. It was windy and the sun was blinding. All I had in my hands was a bag containing copies of documents, a flash drive, and an old letter from my father. My head was spinning. I hadn't warned him I was coming. I hadn't called. I didn't need permission. I wanted to see the eyes of the man who had ruined my life and who was probably convinced he had done me a favor. Alan's house was the same as ever, 2 stories, yellow brick, a neat lawn, symmetrical bushes. The perfect picture for a legal titan. Ironically, I once dreamed of living in a house like this. I rang the doorbell. A few seconds passed, and the door opened. Avril. Alan raised his eyebrows in surprise, still in his houseclothes, a cup of coffee in his hands. You were supposed to be in New York. I need to talk to you. My voice was dry. Come in. He took a step back. What happened? I walked into the hall without taking off my coat. I was at the Department of Justice. I said it bluntly, looking him in the eye. His hand froze with the cup halfway to his mouth, but he quickly regained his composure. The DOJ? What do they want from you? Lexford Holdings. Ardent Bridge Capital. Offshore accounts. My signature. Documents I don't remember signing. IP logins from your company. Emails from my account. Want me to go on? He looked down. Then he slowly placed his cup on the table in the foyer. Avril. It's not what it looks like. No? Because it looks like you used me as a cover. Without my knowledge. Without my consent. He sighed. And for the first time in my life, he didn't seem like my uncle or my mentor. He seemed like an old man who didn't know how to keep the world from falling apart. It was a long time ago. And it was an investment structure. To protect the family. After your father died, I I interrupted him. Just walked into my life, used my name, my signature, my account. I wanted you to have a backup. In case something went wrong. The world is tough, Avril. You're young. You don't understand how big money works. You forged my signatures. I didn't forge them. I asked you to sign, and you signed. Without knowing what it was. Legally, that's consent. I felt my temples throbbing. Alan, you're a lawyer. And you're stealing my life, hiding behind the phrase legally it's consent? I was protecting you, he said quietly. If things had gone wrong, you would have taken the fall. But I was in control. I wouldn't have let that happen. And I love you. I grew up with your father. I felt responsible. It wasn't fraud. It was insurance. At my expense. He fell silent. I took out the flash drive and put it on the dresser. Here's the evidence. And the recordings. And everything I gave to the investigation. I can still keep quiet. I can still say nothing in public. But I want to know, why did you do it? He sat down on the edge of the chair, holding his head in his hands. Because I was afraid. That you wouldn't make it. That the world would break you. And this way, you would have had capital. A start. An advantage. Do you know what advantage I had? I almost whispered. My conscience. Now I don't have that either. I turned and walked to the door. Avril, his voice was broken. If you go against me, you'll destroy more than just me. You'll destroy everything we've built. Our family. Our name. I'm not destroying our family, Alan. I'm cleansing it. I walked out without looking back. On the train back to New York, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel afraid. I felt angry. Pure, righteous anger. And underneath it, a glimmer of something new. Freedom. The next morning, I woke up with a clear thought. I would no longer defend myself. I was tired of reacting. Of being the one who was always playing catch-up, explaining, justifying, remembering. It was time to dig forward. It was time to understand how deep this story went, and how many others like me had become part of someone else's defense plan. I started with public records. Lexford Holdings wasn't the only company listed in Delcorp, Delaware's corporate registry. AL Legal Group had helped register at least 9 other companies in 3 years. The names of the owners were all familiar. 2 were former interns at the firm. One was the younger brother of a colleague. One was the daughter of Alan's neighbor. I wrote down the names. I found them on Facebook. I started writing, "Hello. My name is Avril Lane. This may seem strange, but your name appears in documents related to the law firm AL Legal Group. If you don't mind talking, it could be important. I was also involved with them without my consent." The first to respond was a girl named Claire Morales. "Hi, Avril. You're the first person to talk about this openly. I was afraid. But I had the same experience. I was an intern at AL Legal in 2016. Then I found out that I was listed in documents as a co-owner of a company in the Virgin Islands. We arranged to meet at a cafe in Soho. Claire looked even younger than in her photo. 27, dark hair, black sweater. She came with a folder that she held tightly like armor. "I didn't want to go back to this," she said, not touching her coffee. "But after what you said, I realized we're not alone. How many people do you think there are?" "I've heard about 4. One of them is a guy named Brandon. He filed a lawsuit, but the case was covered up. Did you go to the DOJ? I was afraid. I'm already there. And if we get more witnesses, they'll listen to us. Claire pulled out copies of the documents. They looked like mine. Same signatures. Same agent, illegal. Same dates. Did they reimburse you for anything? They transferred $1,500 to me via Venmo after I signed. I thought it was a bonus. Now I realize it was hush money. I felt my stomach churn. Can I take copies? I'll give them to my lawyer. We already have the logins, the flash drive, my father's letter, Avril. If this goes public, it will destroy him. And probably the whole firm. And it will destroy dozens of stories built on lies. She looked at me, and I saw that for the first time, she wasn't alone. That same evening, I contacted Alan's former employee, Jason. He was a junior lawyer there from 2015 to 2017. We exchanged a few messages, and he agreed to meet. We sat in a bar. He ordered whiskey, I ordered water. I knew someone would come sooner or later, he said. I saw those contracts. The names. The signatures. But no one asked any questions. Did you understand what was going on? I suspected. But in that firm, it was better not to ask. Alan had connections, power. Everyone was afraid. I kept quiet, and I still hate myself for it. Can you testify? He sighed. If I get a subpoena, yes. But otherwise, I don't want to lose everything. I've already lost everything. He looked at me and nodded. Okay. I'll give you a written statement. But no publicity. Not yet. I thanked him and went out into the night air. I stood by the bar, looked at the city, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt that I was not alone. Alan's scheme was crumbling. And I was ready to destroy it completely. I hadn't planned on going to my parents' house. But after talking to Claire and Jason, I felt that the answers weren't just in official documents. Something told me that the clues were closer than I thought. Where it all began. I asked my mother if I could look through the old boxes that had been stored in the garage since we buried my father. She nodded silently. It was cold. It smelled of dust and the past. I pulled out box after box. Photos, books, my father's awards, notebooks. In one of the boxes, I found a doll I had slept with as a child. In another, I found envelopes with letters between my parents, dated in the 90s. And then, suddenly, a small black flash drive with no label. It was wrapped in a handkerchief and hidden in an empty soap box. I recognized the handwriting on the piece of paper inside. Avril. Only open if you don't know who to trust. I felt my breath catch in my throat. In my bedroom, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. There were 3 folders. Video, April 2015. Audio, Mary. Notes, G. Roth/A. Lane. The first folder contained 5 video files. I clicked play. On the screen was my parents' study. The camera was positioned discreetly at an angle. In the frame was my Uncle Alan, sitting opposite my father, leafing through documents. Alan, if she signs now, we can get her into Lexford. The rest is technical details. Father, she's a student. She doesn't understand what she's getting herself into. Alan, it's a form of protection. A cover. You wanted her to have a safe start. Father, not like this. The frame cuts off. The next video is from a few days later. My mother is in the frame, arguing with Alan. Mother, this is wrong. You're playing with her name. If she finds out, she'll hate you. And me. Alan, she won't find out. Everything is perfectly arranged. Even if there's an inspection, it will look like she knew everything. Mother, I won't sign anything. Alan, then I'll say it was your idea. I've already covered myself. The camera shakes. The video cuts off. I sat there, not breathing. I played the audio file. Avril, if you're listening to this, you know you found out. I tried to stop this. But I lost. My brother used me, you even your father. I signed one document, only because Alan said everything was already taken care of. That I was just confirming my consent to storage. I didn't know it was about accounts, companies, and millions. But now you know more than I ever did. I'm sorry. If you can forgive me. Mom. I cried. I didn't know which was stronger, anger or pain. My mother, who had been silent for years, had also been deceived. Or forced to remain silent. And all these years, Alan had worn a mask, a patron, a pillar of the family, an advisor. But behind that mask was a cold calculator. I opened the last folder, notes. A list of names. Amounts. Transfer details. The names Claire and Brandon. And mine. Opposite it was $1,500,000. Next to it was the date, assets placed through Lane Family Trust. He had set up a fictitious trust in my name. There was no such trust in my life. But on paper it existed. And then I realized the scale of it. This wasn't just a scheme. It was a multi-layered operation to launder money through young relatives and interns. Under the guise of protection. Under the guise of family. I called Naomi. Late at night. I have new evidence. Video, audio, and digital traces of falsification. Plus the names of other victims. I understand. We're preparing a request for an extended investigation. This is no longer a personal conflict. This is an organized scheme. And my mother, she was involved. That complicates things emotionally. But legally it's the opposite. You now have the full picture. I nodded. Even though she couldn't see me. Next step. A public appeal. We'll file a motion through the prosecutor's office requesting witness protection. And you decide if you're ready to go public with this. I looked at the flash drive in my hand. And I knew there was no turning back. After I handed over the flash drive with the materials, official notifications arrived. On Wednesday, June 3rd, I received a letter from the prosecutor's office. There were 3 sections. Confirmation of protected witness status. The DOJ acknowledges that I was personally involved in the criminal scheme, but acted without conscious consent, and accepts my cooperation. Personal security. My information, security, and instructions on what to do in case of a threat have been provided. Guarantees from law enforcement. Protection of testimony. Prevention of pressure from Alan's business partners. That same day, I called Ilya. If this works, Alan's scheme will be exposed. I articulated clearly, we are setting a precedent. The case could be referred to Congress. Good work. His voice remained calm as if he believed it. You need people like that around you so you don't fall. I spent the evening sitting by the open window reading the prosecutor's documents. Every word was like a sentence. But I knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Day 5 after submitting the documents. I get out of the subway and hear tires screeching behind me. I step onto the other side of the tracks. A large car speeds past, missing me by inches. I'm shaking, my heart is pounding. This is no accident. I understand, these threats aren't just pieces of paper, they're iron and pressure. I live with security, but sometimes I want to go out alone to feel the air. But it's getting harder to find something to breathe. My neighbors look at me differently. They don't know the details, but you can't forget the name Lane. In the elevator, someone remarks, "Why do you need so much security at home?" As if I'm a criminal. At work, the panic is even greater. Even though I'm officially on vacation, rumors are spreading. A devilish operation by a family of lawyers, millions over an innocent girl. Letters on LinkedIn. Drop this story, you value your job. I don't respond. Next steps. Naomi prepares a request to Congress regarding the conflict of interest. The subject is the use of lawyers as front men. We agree on a media strategy, a press conference after the first hearings. For now, the information is classified. I continue to meet with witnesses, Claire, Jason, and 2 others. We draft a joint statement. We find another former employee, Anna. She shares details. The money went through fake real estate contracts and was then legalized as student grants. Everything is in my name. I couldn't believe the ways they were funneling money. The first blows. Last night, I found an anonymous envelope at my door. A silver envelope with no signature. Inside were coins, copies of photos of my house, my address, and a card. "You are far away, the investigator is coming." My heart sank. I called the investigators. They took note of it. The next day, the police came to my house. I thought, will I be afraid? But instead of fear, I felt determination. I realized that if I stopped, everything would stop. If I flinched, they would win. The press conference was scheduled for June 24th. Naomi explained that it would be an off-site location with DOJ representatives and several witnesses and that we were ready. Our words had to be precise. I looked in the mirror. I was tired, but my eyes were burning. Because I knew one thing. I was ready for war. On the morning of June 24th, I woke up earlier than usual, at 5:45 a.m. The sun was just beginning to touch the skyscrapers, but my body was already buzzing with anxiety. It was the day of my press conference. The day I was to go public and tell the truth about my uncle, about the scheme, and about how my family had used my name. Naomi insisted, "Look confident, speak briefly, don't get emotional, but be sincere." I put on a white shirt with a stiff collar and pulled my hair back into a bun. I looked in the mirror and said to myself, "You've already been through hell. Now just keep going." The room was modest, not a large stage, but a conference space in a law center. There were microphones on the podium, journalists with recorders, and a few cameras. Naomi was next to me, DOJ agents on either side of the room. I waited for the signal. The assistant federal prosecutor spoke before me, briefly outlining the case. The use of front men, money laundering, and the cooperation of one of the witnesses that had allowed the case to move forward. That witness was me. When he announced my name, I stepped up to the microphone. My heart was beating in my throat. My name is Avril Lane. I am 29 years old. And today I stand before you not as a lawyer, not as a compliance professional, but as a person who became part of a criminal scheme without my knowledge or consent. And as a person who has decided to no longer remain silent. I paused for a few seconds. The room was silent. In 2015, as a student, I signed a series of documents without understanding their content. They became the basis for the establishment of offshore companies and financial transactions that I did not initiate and knew nothing about. At the center of it all is my uncle Alan Lane, a partner in a law firm. He used my name, my signature, and my trust, hiding behind family ties. When I found out about this, I couldn't believe it. But the facts were indisputable. And now I am cooperating with the investigation, not to save myself, but to stop this practice. I looked around the room again. If you have been a victim of similar actions, know that you are not alone. I was the same. But silence is exactly what they are counting on. And we can break it. I finished and walked away. I was shaking. Naomi squeezed my hand. Perfect. No drama. No weakness. Just right. The journalists immediately started asking questions. The DOJ limited access to a maximum of 3 questions. I answered briefly, calmly, not allowing myself to break down. After the speech, I left through a back door, accompanied by security. The air was hot and humid, but I felt empty, like after surgery without anesthesia. When I returned to my apartment, I saw a message from my mother. "Avril, I can't listen to this. These are our people. This is your father, this is Alan. You're putting everything out there for everyone to see. I don't know if I can forgive you." One message. Nothing else. I reread it 10 times. For the first time in all this time, I just wanted to disappear. Turn off my phone. Disappear from the radar. The next morning, the headlines were everywhere. Lawyer's daughter turns against family empire. The truth that breaks dynasties. Avril Lane, victim or new symbol of exposure? Journalists asked for comments. Former colleagues remained silent. It was already clear that I would not be taken back. Some friends stopped responding to messages. But I got a letter from Claire. She wrote, "I watched. And I cried. Thank you. We are not alone now." And then there was a message from Jason. "After your speech, I decided to file an official complaint. You gave us backbone. I'm with you." It wasn't redemption, but it was important. That evening, I met up with Eiley. We sat in a small bar in Brooklyn where an old jazz record was playing. "I thought it would be easier," I said. "That after the truth, it would be easier. The truth doesn't take away the pain. It takes away the lies. Mom doesn't understand. She's not ready yet. But she will. You've already done more than most people do." For the first time, I allowed myself to breathe. A few days later, there was silence. Silence from Alan. Silence from home. Only the DOJ was working. They informed me that he had been officially charged and his firm was under investigation. Naomi warned me that the next step would be a hearing. And possibly a meeting with him in the courtroom. I was ready. At 7 a.m. on July 12th, I was already in New York City, sitting at the kitchen table, drinking coffee from my favorite mug and reading my lawyer's documents. It was the day of the first hearing, where I was supposed to officially testify as a key witness in the DOJ investigation against my uncle. The city was still asleep, but I already wanted to do something. Wash my hair, run to the courtroom? But it was better to be ready. Naomi was already waiting for me outside the federal courthouse in Manhattan. "Let's do this right," she said, checking her watch. I nodded. Between us was a cold sea of blue waves of hallways and waiting rooms. The courtroom, with its antique furniture, resembled the atmosphere of a movie. Here it wasn't the cameras that mattered, but the voice. I walked through the metal detector and handed my passport to the court officer. Naomi handed me a briefcase with documents, printouts of metadata, transcripts of audio recordings, and signature comparison charts. I sat down next to Claire, Jason, and Anna, all former employees of the firm. Our eyes met and we all fell silent. Not because we were afraid, but because now we were together. Our other families, our standard families, would not help us now. The judge entered at 9 a.m., wearing a pink jacket and a restrained expression. The representatives of the parties were already in place. The DOJ on the left, Alan's lawyers on the right. The entrance for the press was clearly marked. The judge announced, "We are opening the case of the United States versus Lane. We have distributed questions regarding the status of witnesses and preliminary evidence. Ms. Lane, are you ready to testify?" I nodded. "I am ready." The judge briefly reviewed the proceedings. Pretrial hearing, actual court hearing, presentation of evidence. The court grants access to the metadata of the Google account, the video found in the defendant's possession, and the audio recording from your car. I looked at Naomi. She didn't say anything, but I was surprised it was already working. Naomi explained when our cross-examination would begin. The U.S. had requested that DOJ agents and a couple of former employees of the firm be called in. The first to come out was Agent Eli Brooks, who was in charge of digital intelligence. "Did you check Ms. Lane's Google account logs?" "Yes," Eli replied. "There were 3 logins on the day Lexford Holdings was registered, IP addresses from the AL legal office, and a clear meeting log for May 27th. Was it established that the scanned documents were downloaded from a MacBook device on Lane's company network?" "Yes." "Is there an audio recording that directly describes how this case was handled?" "Yes, on a flash drive given to Ms. Lane." I glanced at the woman in the room. She was writing everything down. Then Claire left, followed by Jason. Their statements were real and unemotional. I was asked to sign and say that I knew what I was signing. I got a bonus and didn't ask any questions. I felt guilty, but I was afraid to say anything. Every word laid the legal groundwork. When it was my turn, all I felt was dry eyes, an empty head, and determination. "Your name. Did you sign the Lexford Holdings documents?" "Yes," I replied quietly. "But I don't understand what I signed." "Did you ask your uncle for help with certifying the documents?" "Yes." "Please tell me, did anyone ever explain to you that this could be part of an offshore scheme?" "No." "But you only realize that now?" "Yes." "Do you believe you were used?" "Absolutely." It may have sounded emotional, but there was no applause in the courtroom for a long time. Just silence and water falling on stone. 2 hours later, the judge referred the case to the DOJ. The documents were accepted by the court. The court hearing was closed and postponed until August. We left the noisy courtroom as if we were fish out of water. I held on to the documents and looked at Claire. She nodded. I knew we had broken a powerful system. Not all of it, but enough to hide under it. After the hearing, it became clear that the feds had officially opened an investigation into AL Legal. Alan was banned from working. His partners were suspended. Articles poured in. The collapse of the Arlene Park family of lawyers. Fake signatures in offshore companies. The empire of a once successful lawyer on the brink of ruin. Friends had long since stopped calling. But I understand those who are afraid. However, I became one of those who seek the truth. More than that, I do it out of self-preservation. Everything is clear, everyone can see it. The next evening, I met with my mother. I arrived at her house with Naomi. It was 3 days after the hearing. Her eyes were tired and expectant. "I saw it," she said quietly. "Your testimony. It was powerful." I couldn't find the words. "Mom, I didn't ask you to understand. I just want you to know why I did it." She looked at me and hugged me. I cried. So did she. That evening I sat on the balcony, looked at Manhattan, and thought, we are breaking the system. But we still have to build a new one. I am different. And I already knew that the hardest part was ahead of me. But so was true freedom. The next morning after the hearing, I received a call from my former office. An empty desk. No warning. They informed me that I was being removed from all projects, and that my contract was being terminated. Due to the situation in your family related to the allegations, management has decided that your position has become too controversial. their HR specialist said politely. "We understand. But it's for the sake of our clients. I no longer have access to my corporate account? No. You have a week to hand over your work and close your office." "Understood." I hung up and cried. Not because I was in shock. It was because I, Avril Lane, was no longer considered a young professional. I was now considered a risk. I spent the next few days in an empty cafe. I would arrive early, order tea, take out my laptop, and just sit there among strangers. My colleagues whom I worked with every day didn't approach me. Several lunch invitations from friends remained unread. Just to explain. But none of them came. I looked at my laptop and couldn't bring myself to start looking for another job. How was I going to live? One day my phone rang. It was a message from Anna, a former colleague. "Avril, I read an article about how Alan brought new clients to the company. Maybe I should have said something earlier. If you want, I can meet with you and help you with your new initiative." Her sincerity was genuine. It was the first sign that I had support. And that was the beginning. That evening, I sat down at my desk with my laptop and opened a new document. Law for Families Integrity Initiative. It was just a working template, but I named the main goal: to help victims of similar schemes and provide free legal support. I wrote the first few paragraphs. It was scary, but I was already dreaming. My mother came to my house, hiding her sadness for the first time. "I want to be there for you," she said. "I won't be silent anymore." I held her hand. "We can start together." It was a small rebirth. Through Anna, I was approached by a young woman who had found herself in a similar scheme. Her name had been used to transfer money. She asked that her name not be published. I explained that I was willing to help on a pro bono basis. We met, and I saw fear and indifference, but also the first glimmer of hope. I stayed up late writing documents, appeals, and letters to lawyers. I went from painful silence to active action, proposing initiatives and establishing contacts. I felt that although I had lost a lot, there was still more left. Only now did this burden make sense. I sat on the balcony watching the city light up. My heart was silent, maybe even calm. Pain lost new feelings. But now I am not alone. This escape from symbolic success is my real work. On September 1st, I registered a legal initiative called Family Integrity Legal Aid. A simple website, a home email address, and an initial logo, two intertwined surnames symbolizing truth and justice. No major investments, just an idea. To help those who have fallen victim to schemes involving family ties. We launched our first free webinar. I sat in front of the camera in a small meeting room, with my mother and Anna beside me. The topic was, how not to become a tool in someone else's scheme. I talked about my own experience and what to look out for. Requests for access to personal data, suspicious help from relatives, documents that had not been read. There were 70 participants online. The first questions came, and I even saw a sparkle in the eyes of several people, which meant that they didn't have to remain silent. News about the initiative began to spread. I hired several volunteers, former lawyers, and found a charity that would pay for an office in Brooklyn. The idea is now protected and receiving support. Anna became co-coordinator. Claire helps with PR. Jason works remotely but provides technical support and digital security every week. In the evenings, I work on legal options. We create templates for appeals and statements and prepare information booklets for families. I felt that despite the losses and the public scandal, this was my beginning. After another hearing in September, the first excerpts from the transcript appeared. Alan Lane. Yes, I admit that I organized a procedural framework through Lexford in 2015. Yes, I showed Avril the form and asked her to sign it. And yes, I knew she didn't fully understand the scope of the operation. But I thought I was protecting her. These words are not a full admission of guilt. But it was the first thing that sounded like an apology or at least an opening. The DOJ added this to the official evidence. The media wrote that my uncle was gradually admitting his guilt. I read this in the morning, overwhelmed with mixed feelings, pain and relief. Part of my family had moved on. Part of it was still just beginning to fall apart. A month and a half after launching the initiative, I organized a public meeting offline in a conference room at a library in New York. The 40-seat room was filled almost the entire time. People asked real questions. How can I prove that I was used? How can I protect my documents? Where to go if your family has betrayed your trust? I felt how words that didn't quite fit in my heart began to create something. I asked the audience what was important, and I knew that our next focus would be a template letter to the prosecutor's office for people whose names had been used without their consent. At the next hearing, Anna was present as a witness. Her testimony, that she supported Avril's efforts, was quoted in the press. I saw a person I respect living in a painful conflict, but she didn't stop. She didn't even break down. This was a powerful catalyst for public dialogue. We added her quotes to the website. Fortune Legal published a high-profile article about us. How a lawyer's daughter led the fight for truth, with powerful quotes and a photo of me holding a microphone, with my mother and volunteers standing next to me. Interest grew, but so did the attacks. A group of lawyers on Reddit started a discussion. Could such an initiative fuel general distrust of the legal profession? There were heated debates. Some saw our case as a chance to clean up the profession. Alan's firm officially changed its name and laid off some of its employees. The newspapers wrote, AL Legal is no longer a player in the courtroom. A detailed article said, the organizational collapse of the firm is a direct result of its advocacy for family justice. It's crazy how simple words can drive change. In the evening, I sat with my mother and Anna on the balcony. It was warm. The air smelled of blossoming trees. I looked at them and thought, we made it through this year. We didn't give up. My mother touched my hand. I'm proud of you. And I'm proud of you, I replied. I looked at the screen and wrote new material. Future topics: protecting children in family schemes, digital identity audits, legal hygiene when signing documents. I knew that I was no longer the daughter of a man who had betrayed me. I am Avril Unbreakable. November 29th is a date I will remember for the rest of my life. The trial had been dragging on for a long time. I had attended hearings, given testimony, and supported other victims. Now the moment had come for the system to deliver its verdict. I stood in the hallway of the federal courthouse, breathing in the cold morning air. I was wearing a dark gray dress, simple without frills. Naomi stood next to me, holding the sentencing documents in her hand. Are you ready? She asked quietly. Yes, I replied, although my heart was beating faster than usual. The courtroom was not crowded, but the atmosphere was tense. Alan was in the center, wearing a gray suit with his coat off, sitting next to his lawyer. He looked me in the eyes. I tried to hold his gaze, but I didn't see the eyes of the uncle I remembered. Instead, I saw the heat of his attempt to justify himself, fueled by pain and hope. Behind me were Claire, Jason, and Anna. My mother was behind me, but she was there. She didn't say anything during the hearing. She was just there. The judge entered and opened the hearing. Today we will hear the case of the United States against Alan Lane. The charges relate to the organization of a financial scheme using front men, criminal money laundering, and breach of trust. She glanced through the documents and paused on Alan. Does the defense wish to make a final statement? The lawyer nodded. He asked Alan to ask the judge if he had the right to speak. The judge allowed it. Alan stood up. His voice was quiet but confident. Your Honor, I admit my responsibility. I did organize Lexford Holdings and used the documents and signatures. I asked my niece to sign them, thinking it was for her own good, to create some startup capital. I didn't realize the scale of it, but I admit I was wrong. I beg you, don't punish me in a way that would be a defeat for those I was trying to protect. I asked God, I asked above all to give me a chance to fix this. His eyes met mine. There was pain there. But I was no longer a child in the shadow of my aunt and uncle. I was the face of the court, the eyes of justice. The judge looked at me, then at Alan. In recognition of the facts, the court finds Alan Lane guilty on 2 counts: organizing schemes using front men and abuse of trust. He is sentenced to 4 years in prison and a fine of $1.5 million. The courtroom fell silent, as if the water had been drained from it. I closed my eyes, the feeling relief. The relief that comes when the truth takes the form of the law. My mother came over and hugged me for the first time in a year. I squeezed her hand. Thank you, she whispered. This is your victory, Mom. Claire and Anna ran over. We stood together, as if carrying our wounds out of the courtroom. You did it, Anna said. We did it, I corrected her. We were no longer a group, we had become a family of advice and justice. With the scheme destroyed, the sentence handed down, and the court officially closed, a door opened before me. We at Family Integrity Legal Aid already had new requests. I received an invitation to speak at a conference on ethics in the legal profession. I looked at the photo, first at myself, then at my mother. I thought, you're not a niece anymore. You're an example. In the evening, I sat down at my laptop. On the screen was the word prologue. My next project was my memoir. I would call it The Legacy I Never Chose. Why? That's another story. But I knew one thing. This was my destiny. One morning when I woke up, the first thing I did was look in the mirror. And I didn't just see a girl whose daughter had been through court. I saw myself. Over the past 3 years, the surname, Lane, has become more than just a name. It has become a symbol of lies, betrayal, and family business. I had it since childhood, but I never really chose it. The time had come to decide whether I wanted to continue bearing it. I returned to my blog, to the introductory parts of the initiative. I wrote about how a name builds trust. But what if the name itself betrayed that trust? At some point, I felt that it wasn't just legal victories that mattered, but internal ones as well. I needed to finally break out of the shadows. It all started with a letter from a reader. Thank you for your words. But for me, it's not your last name that matters, it's what you've done. And that helps me find strength. Your name is important too, but it's not the main thing. That stopped me in my tracks. I read it several times. And I realized that it's not a surname that shapes a person, but their actions. After a few days of thinking, I called Naomi. I want to change my surname. It's a logical step. Are you ready for a new start? Yes. I want to keep part of my name, but without the baggage. I decided to take Avril Gray. What a beautiful and profound decision. I support you. I wrote a statement for the Family Integrity Legal Aid blog. I am no longer Avril Lane. I am Avril Gray. This is not a spontaneous gesture, it is a symbol of what I have kept myself. My past will no longer dictate my future. I am keeping the family we have created, all of us who have stood by each other through this journey. And together we are our new Lane. Slowly, I updated my website, my signature on emails, and my social media accounts. It wasn't an attempt to erase the past, it was a gesture of freedom. My mother wrote me a long message. I am proud of Avril, who bravely chose herself. With or without this name, you will always be my daughter. Once again, her words were powerful. Anna, Claire, Jason, they all supported me publicly. They called me Avril Gray on the website. It was a new chapter. Last week, my mom and I planted a tree near the initiative's office. A tree of new beginnings, without roots in the old shadows, but with branches reaching for the light. When the first brown spot of leaves appeared, it was a symbol that I hadn't just survived. I had chosen. With the name Gray, I feel like I can move forward. I'm already working on a book, conferences, and programs. Some people will say, what's in a name? But for me, it's the result of a struggle. I call it Legacy I Chose. And this page is a new beginning. Next week at Harvard Law School, I will give my first lecture as Avril Gray. Topics: ethical responsibility, family betrayal, digital security. And all my speeches will begin like this. My name is Avril Gray, and I went through a family crisis that gave birth to my new mission. I'm getting ready. And I know that the next steps will be real. Not a case study of family history, but a story of human strength. I haven't erased Lane from my life. But I'm no longer a symbol of her. I've become who I've always been, a person who chooses truth. I am me. And I have a name that carries my own decisions and dreams. It's the morning of January 10th. I'm sitting in the kitchen of my new apartment in Brooklyn, at home with my coffee, my laptop, and no stress. Instead of tension and urgency, there is silence and the taste of dawn. This is not the morning of a court hearing or a press conference. This is just a normal morning in a new life. Yesterday, I returned from a lecture at Harvard Law School. I walked down a narrow corridor, hearing the rustling of folders and the chatter of students. And I realized, this is a different reality. It's not the surname Lane knocking on the door. It's Gray. And that's me. I shared my experiences, answered questions about ethical dilemmas, family dynamics, and digital control. Today's schedule: meeting with Anna and Claire, who are preparing a raid on the office of a new initiative. Meeting with volunteers. Then an interview for Ethics in Law magazine. Everything was planned. And only I decide what's important. That's freedom of choice. A new topic: launching a mini grant for lawyers who defend people in cases where their relatives are used as a front. We already have the first applications. A call from my mother. I'll be home tonight. I want to invite you to dinner for New Year's Eve. I'll be waiting, I reply. But I have a lecture at Harvard early in the morning. I know, I'm proud of you. Her voice is warm, not trembling. That means we are healing. 20 minutes after I send the document to the volunteer, an email arrives. Avril, I received your support. I was panicking, but you gave me free advice. Now I have filed my application and I know that I will be heard. This is life-changing. Thank you. I read it 3 times. My heart feels warm. Here is a result that cannot be summed up in a sentence, a name, or a press release. After lunch, I sit with the team in the office. We laugh. I read a meme about lawyers. Anna brings cookies. Claire shows us the layout of the updated website, and Eli is still remotely configuring the security system. This is our reality. And I'm not just a symbol. I'm part of the team. In the evening, my mom comes home. We make dinner, chicken, a light salad, and a berry pie. She tells me about a neighbor who asked her my name and said with a smile, "Gray, that's a pretty name." I touch her hand and feel that we have healed. We have a new name, not as a rejection of the past, but as a foundation for the future. After dinner, I go into my room and look in the mirror. In front of me is a woman with a clear gaze, tired but bright eyes. That's me. With scars but without shadows. I think, today is not a post about a press conference or a court case. Today is about the everyday life I have managed to build for myself. I smile. In the first part of this story, there was a heavy box of documents, clips from my father's coffin, and a flash drive that changed everything. Today there are no boxes. There are no long lists of schemes. There is only me and my strength in the name that has become my own. I turn off the lamp and hear the streets of Brooklyn quietly snoring. Today is not the end. It is the beginning.